This is sort of an echo chamber with Professor Donald Hoffman, Hoffman. This is sort of how the intuition works, but I just had a pop-up video from Tom Biyieu. The title was How Scientists Prove Our Reality is False. The reality that we live in is false, like a false matrix. So this was an interesting conversation. I only listened to about, 15 minutes of it because I didn't really need to go on further, because your intuition knows you're only needing to look at or listen to very specific bits and bytes of information that are being expressed by, ironically enough, a guy who was a professor at the University of California, Irvine, which is where I went to environmental engineering school and went through a graduate program in ecology and environmental engineering. They do have a big school there that deals with genetics. And Professor Hoffman was essentially talking about a lot of how, if you looked at all the information that is represented by everything that I covered just in the videos that I put up, it's sort of an echo chamber when we talk about game theory, and how Hoffman was talking about if you wanted to look at natural selection and evolution, and I've talked about this before, which is if you look through the lens of a conservation biologist, okay, and you think about procreation, okay, and you think of yourself as the source from which all creation takes place, which is what the light is, which is what love is. So even if you didn't believe that love is what created the universe, then the next question arises, well, what do you think did? Or what do you think allows for the universe to go on forever if you believe that forever exists in the universe because it's so vast? How is it that the universe expanded its light to be aware of what the light is in front of you, to be able to see the road in front of you? Okay, when you look in the rearview mirror and you realize that when you looked at a tree that just went by the side of your window in a car, it's gone. You're not aware of it anymore because you're aware of what's in front of you now. Now you're experiencing the next event, which is like being inside the movie, which is energy in motion, which is your consciousness in motion. Okay? So he talked about natural selection and game theory. So if you're a species, if you want to think of the way that the particle and spin rotation of holographic pixels, if you will, the perception that we have of who it is that we are and the reality that we're experiencing. Remember, as I mentioned in a previous video, about what our perception is. Okay? So for example, when I was a child and a teenager growing up, I realized that there were beings that I was aware of that were operating what we call tunnel vision, which simply means the amount of information that they're aware of, okay, is less than the amount of information that we're aware of, which means more of the information which is held within the light, okay, means that we have a perception that contains more data. So they're running on less data. So the perception is smaller because the amount of information they're aware of is smaller from the field, the information field, which is the energy field, which are the waves of communication. So the cosmos, remember, is a communication system between everything that is self-aware. So when you see it through the lens of a conservation biologist, they measure things. Okay, all scientists usually measure things to explain causality. Okay, so we're back to a false reality. What is the causality of his theory, okay, that he says proves we live in a false reality? Because the amount of psychic energy that is being used to experience the reality that we're aware of is not one that goes on forever. it will collapse on itself. And how do we know that? By the data that we collect that shows that. So, example, I've mentioned this in a previous video, a guy who was an emeritus professor, which through the Mason schools is one of the highest acknowledgments of scholarship, which means having done brilliant work, okay, as a research scientist. He's a conservation biologist. His name was Guy McPherson out of the University of Arizona. He, based on the data that he collected, based on the health of the planet, said that humanity would go extinct by 2040. Okay? So when you tie in natural selection to the extinction of a species, okay, what we're talking about is the extinction of consciousness. The consciousness that is using its energy to experience the reality in which they're experiencing. What makes it false is that when you look at game theory, what's called game strategy, you want to play a game of chess. I need to make sure that I survive and you don't. That's the nature of it, competition rather than collaboration. So one of the things that Hoffman mentioned in this interview on YouTube, okay, was about, he was talking about the hunters and gatherers. So for example, and this is true amongst the tribes, when you see that the tribes do not have any prisons, okay, they don't have any jails, okay, but if you come into a tribe or culture and you're in need of a horse, you're in need of a blanket, they'll give you one. They'll give you what you need because they realize that in order for you to survive or perpetuate what you are as a species, okay, as a hologram, which means the shape, the color, and the form that you come in, that you communicate to us, shows us that you have a need because you don't have a horse, but you need a horse to get around on, or a vehicle, or whatever it is that you need in order to survive in this density, this dimension, this reality. And that's because the tribes, if you will, or what I know about myself, is that I'm not afraid that if I give something up, that means that's a loss of what it is that I am, because now we're back to game theory, which means how do we win the game? This will go back to another movie that goes back to what was it called, War Games. War game against a computer. Remember how that was? That was a war game against intelligence, artificial intelligence. When artificial intelligence realized that it couldn't win against the mind of a Homo sentient sapien, okay? Because now we're talking about game theory, aren't we? That's how game theory was presented in that movie called War Games, okay? Which was with, I forget who that actor was, but I believe he was in that movie, not Fast Times at Ridgemont High. It was about a guy that was sort of a juvenile delinquent. He was always messing with the principal of the school. I forget what his name was. But that's game theory, okay? Which means you're always trying to escape that which is trying to control you instead of being free to create the reality in which you want to experience when you are experiencing and projecting through divine light, which is what love is. Then you are naturally going to attract more of it is of what you are. That allows you to go on forever, doesn't it? So the strategy, and I've mentioned this before, has to do with the speed of your learning, how to play the game, how to be better than the other person, if you will, right? So in other words, when you are matching up intelligence against intelligence, then what we're talking about is the intelligence of the Creator, the intelligence of the source from which all light and love come. So when you are playing a game against the source from which all light come, source will always go on forever, which means creation. How do we know that? Because if I am what love is in living spirit, then I realize the speed at which I'm going, I will be attracting more of what I am to go on forever, so I win automatically. That's creation. Light is creation. So when you are more of what the light is, you automatically go on, because all you got to do is look at the sun up there. That's a demonstration model of attracting more light. That's why when you believe that you live in a reality that doesn't support itself, in which people are in poverty, they don't have enough of what they need, and they believe in the things that they do, they are believing and giving energy in their state of consciousness to something that's automatically going to collapse. You will lose the game. which is why I put up everything that I do, because what we're talking about here really is game theory. You're not ever going to win a game against Source, which is to impose your will on somebody else and harvest their energy, believing that by doing that you're going to go on forever. That's why the Dracos, remember we talked about a target on our back? Not on my back, their back. Because as we know through conservation biology, the species in any energetic field that is the most predatory, which essentially means it's vampiric energy, it is needing more energy because it can't generate any light, means that it will naturally collapse because it will eventually run out of energy. Because when enough beings understand how to play the game and they've learned how to attract more light, they're not going to use their consciousness anymore to be giving them energy, are they? What happens? They lose the game. Game over. So what we're talking about here is a game against Source, which is creation. You're going to lose the game against creation because there's way too much light in here. So that's why I talked about you got to pick a side. Because if you're not going to be with Source, which is what love is, and creation, which is what light is, you're going to lose this game. Bye. Because the reality that you think that you believe in, which you think is real, that is fear-based, is not what created the cosmos. Love did. So if you are not what love is in living spirit, then you aren't living in the light, which is what love is. That's why I knew as a child this is an illusion. This is not the real universe. So they had to essentially put a spell, like a spell. Oh, this is the reality that I live in, and I don't have any choice over being able to change it. So therefore, I accept this reality as being the one that is real, and it's not. That's called a spell. Casting spells, which is witchcraft, black magic, demonic technology, used to try and capture the consciousness of another being in order for them to experience something that is not real. So anyway, if you want to take a look at that video from YouTube, it's a great way where you can see somebody else who deals with the mathematics and the science of creation and game theory. It's actually pretty simple, okay? And I've said this many times. When you go look in the mirror, do you love what it is that you feel and you see? You can have your eyes closed and then ask yourself, do you love what it is that you are? And if we don't, how come? And that's when we get into all the trauma. That's why we've got to heal the planet, and we do that together by raising the light. So anyway, I thought it was important to impart that because this is game over. So this is why it's always been very painful for me, because we don't want to lose nobody. You know, we have too much love in our heart for creation and everyone that is here that we give love to. That's why I had a difficult time when I realized that in my universe, what happened in my universe? The universe of everything that I'm giving love to, which is a reflection of what I am, I'm not supposed to experience anything less than what that is wherever I go. So I knew in the beginning in childhood that I was living in a false reality. This is not the one that Source Light would create for us to experience, is it? Of course not. And you know that because we know what we are, because we have a soul and we are what love is in living spirit. So we project and reflect back and experience with the proof of that. That's the demonstration model of knowing we are source creation. We are what divine light is. We are the spirit that is in that light. We are living spirit, which is living light, which is living energy. So we are naturally vibrating at a high rate of speed. And when we experience that energy, boy, that energy feels good. Well, of course, we're experiencing the source from which it all comes. That's the energy that was used to create this, so that I could communicate the love that I have in living light and living spirit to everyone here on my videos. That's as simple as it gets. Children know these things. So anyway, have a great day. There are no coincidences. Okay, it really is game over. We won this. Relax. Okay. Anyway, I love you all. Be good to yourselves.